Hello, pastors and leaders at Lidervisio. Bom dia e como estás? Whether you're speaking Portuguese or English, I wish I could be there in person with you. Thank you so much for your long hours, for the hard work. I know it's not an easy job that you have. I'm entering my 4th decade as a pastor like you. I've heard more stories of pain and heartache than I ever thought possible. Sometimes we don't know what to say, and sometimes the stories are our own stories. I'm wondering if the rough waters are your own. I wonder if you could do me a favor. Take your ministry hat off for just a few moments and use the next few moments to be ministered unto. You don't have an email to respond to. You don't have a to-do list to check. Right now, just let God minister to you. Not too long ago, I saw a friend at a grocery store. She attends our church, hadn't seen her in a while. Asked her about her kids and her husband, and when I did, her eyes watered, her chin quivered, and the story spilled out. He had left her. After 20 years of marriage and 3 kids and a dozen moves, he traded her in for a younger model. And she did her best to maintain her composure, but she couldn't, and she just began to cry. So right there between the tomatoes and the heads of lettuce, she wept and we prayed, and I told her, I said, you're going to get through this. Won't be painless, won't be quick. But God's going to use this mess for good. In the meantime, don't be foolish or naive, but don't despair either. With God's help, you will get through this. A couple of days later, a friend called. He'd just been fired. The dismissal was his fault. He had made some inappropriate remarks at work, and now he's a 57-year-old unemployed manager in a rotten economy, and he feels terrible. He sounds worse. His wife is mad. His kids are confused. He needed encouragement. So I told him, you're going to get through this. Won't be painless or quick, but God will use this mess for good. In the meantime, don't be foolish or naive, but don't despair either. God will help you through this. And then there's the teenager I met at the cafe where she works, fresh out of high school, hoping to get a job next month. Her life has not been easy. Her parents divorced when she was 6. Then they remarried when she was 15, only to divorce again a few months ago. And then her parents told her to choose, live with mom or live with dad. She got misty-eyed as she described the announcement. I didn't have a chance to tell her, but you can bet your sweet September that if I have a chance to tell her, I'm going to say, you're going to get through this. It won't be painless or quick, but God will use this mess for good. In the meantime, don't be foolish or naive, but don't despair either. With God's help, you're going to get through this. Now, where did I get the nerve to speak such promise into such tragedy? Well, I found it in a pit. A pit so deep the boy couldn't climb out, and had he been able to climb out, his brothers would have pushed him back in. Joseph, we all know the story from the book of Genesis. The boy that wore the coat of many colors, his 11 brothers, his doting dad. These brothers threw Joseph in a pit, into an abandoned cistern. Jagged rocks and roots extended from the sides, and the 17-year-old boy was lying down there at the bottom. On his side, hands torn. His voice was hoarse from screaming. It wasn't that his brothers didn't hear him, it was that they didn't want to. 22 years later, when a famine had tamed their swagger and guilt had dampened their pride, they would confess, we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us and we would not hear. You know, these are the great-grandsons of Abraham, the sons of Jacob, famous people. The name of Jesus will appear on their family tree. Yet today, they're the Bible's equivalent of a Bronze Age dysfunctional family. What a mess. They didn't respond when their brother needed them. Their hearts were as hard as the Canaanite desert. The family was in crisis. The brothers caught Joseph far from home, 60 miles away from Daddy's protection. They stripped his tunic, they took him and they cast him into a pit. They wanted not only to kill Joseph, they wanted to hide his body. This was a murderous cover-up from the get-go. Now, Joseph didn't see this coming. He didn't climb out of bed that morning and think, I better dress in padded clothing because this is the day I get tossed into a hole. The attack caught him off guard. So did yours. Joseph's pit came in the form of a cistern. Maybe yours came in the form of a diagnosis or a foster home or a traumatic injury. Joseph was thrown in a hole and despised, and you were I don't know, thrown into an unemployment line and forgotten, into a divorce and abandoned, into a bed and abused. Some people never recover. Their life is reduced to one quest, to get out and never get hurt again. Not easy to do that. Some pits have no easy exits. And Joseph's story got worse before it got better. You remember, abandonment, then enslavement, then entrapment, then imprisonment, sucker punched, sold out, mistreated. People made promises only to break them, gave gifts only to take them back. If hurt were a swampland, then Joseph was sentenced to life of labor in the Everglades. But he never gave up. His heart never hardened. He not only survived, he thrived. He ascended like a helium balloon. You remember that Pharaoh, the highest ruler on the planet, shoulder-tapped Joseph to serve as his prime minister. By the end of his life, Joseph was the second most powerful man of his generation. It's not hyperbole to say he saved the world from starvation. How did he do it? How did he flourish? We don't have to speculate. Some 20 years later, when the roles were reversed, when Joseph was strong and the brothers were weak, they came to him in dread. They thought he was going to throw them into a pit, but Joseph didn't. And he explained to them, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive." You see, in God's hands, intended evil becomes eventual good. Joseph tied himself to this promise. He held on for dear life. Nothing in his story suggests the absence of evil. Quite the contrary. Evil was everywhere. Yet time and time again, God redeemed the pain. The torn robe became a royal one. The pit became a palace. The broken family grew old together. And the very acts that were supposed to destroy God's servant strengthened him. Stories like Joseph's remind us that God can take that which was evil and use it for good. The devil's plan was sinister. He wanted to destroy the family of Abraham, thereby destroy his seed, Jesus Christ. But watch God at work. He redeemed the story of Joseph. Can't He redeem your story as well? Now, I don't know the details of your story. I don't know the heartache that you bear. Maybe your church is seeing hard times. Maybe your congregation is torn. Maybe your family is at odds. Maybe your doctor has sent bad news. But I do know this. You'll get through this. It won't be painless or quick, but God will use this mess for good. Don't be foolish. Don't be naive, but don't despair either. With God's help, you will get through this. God trumps evil. What Satan intends for evil, God redeems for good. And Joseph would tell you, life in the pit stinks. But one good thing about life in the pit, it forces you to look upward. And when you look upward, somebody from up there will look down here and pull you out. God did that for Joseph. He will do that for you. Now you can put your ministry hat back on. I hope that as you go forward, you'll encourage people to stay strong and to not give up. And I hope you'll remember that what God claims, He redeems. And God claims this promise over your life and mine. What Satan intends for evil, God uses for good, always. And for that reason, we know you will get through this.